Welcome into episode 260 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. Sources Say is, as always, brought to you by our good friends at Justice Dental. Visit one of their two Lexington locations. That's on Blazer Parkway and Wellington Way by scheduling an appointment online at justicedental.com or by calling 859-543-0700. You can even send a text message to one of their friendly team members at the same number to ask a question or make an appointment. Now is a great time to schedule your dental cleaning. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Justice, and their team strive to provide you with good oral health and a comfortable environment. The Justice Dental team looks forward to seeing you soon. I'm your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very happy to be joined once again by the one and only Shawn Smith of Go Big Blue Country, who very well could be starting for the University of Kentucky Wildcats next year. We've been teasing a job move, but little did you guys know he's actually going to be one of the scholarship basketball players on the team next year. So congratulations, Shawn Smith.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And we're 7 minutes early for our showtime. Remember, I said 5:40. No, it was my fault today that we're a little bit behind. But no, throw out the whole, like you said, wait till good news to record, and then just throw out my entire theory and idea of mid-May, because mid-May comes mid-June. Mid-June might be mid-July, and at this point, might be mid-year before we really know what this roster is going to look like, because they play games in 7 weeks, and there's no roster to be had, like unless we're going to do a 3-on-3 league.
A whole new definition to 7-on-7, 7 scholarship players in 7 weeks. Yeah, Shawn, what's funny is a week ago today, we recorded the preview for the Keshad Johnson commitment, where at that time, and as I said, talking to Keshad's side, talking to Kentucky's side, they were like, things went really well. They went into decision-making mode early to midweek, and then leading up to the show, it was all positive vibes for Kentucky. We were talking about him as a shoe-in, Chris Livingston replacement, and how, he might not be the offensive powerhouse that you're hoping for, but he provides the winning intangibles and the physical traits, the defense, all of that good stuff. And then he, on Friday, word leaks out rather quickly early that he ultimately settles on Arizona. And the reason for it, and I think this is going to be a recurring theme to this show, is drum roll. He wanted an expanded role on a team that he was comfortable as a contender. Arizona, he just thought had a bigger role for him. And it's a great thing to only want 20 to 25 minutes a game. But if there's another school that's offering you 30 and it's still a high profile, maybe not a blue blood, Arizona's not a blue blood, but there's still a high profile program. Pretty intriguing. So Keshad Johnson out, and at least at that point we were like, well, at least we're going to get Antonio Reeves back. Maybe Chris Livingston changes his mind. Maybe what happens with Oscar Tshiebwe. As things stand right now, Shawn, and I know this is going to sound pretty damning and drastic right now, but I think Kentucky has a better chance of missing out on all three of those three than returning all three right now. And that's a really, really tough spot for Kentucky to be in as of May 24th, exactly 1 week before the withdrawal deadline for NBA draft hopefuls.
Yeah, this is not what you wanted and stuff. A roster that, mid-March, late March is when the season ended. It took a while to kind of make moves with the coaching staff, and no additions to the roster outside of the incoming freshman class, no surprise returning pieces, nothing. Like, it's just been, you see all these other programs in college basketball kind of shoring themselves up and getting players back and landing transfers. And then we talked about how quiet Kentucky was for weeks in the transfer portal with not reaching out to perimeter players and not really pursue anything outside of Hunter Dickinson there for a while. Then you get the Johnson recruitment and you start to think, okay, maybe. And then they go in on a former teammate of his late and make contact. And he commits to Auburn on the same day that he puts out. And I'm like, what are you, at this point, you're just making yourself look silly with what's going on. Like
4 hours after he tweets out the eye emoji. Guess who just called me? Psych.
Yeah. And then
go Auburn.
And then you get played again because you let that happen because everybody starts, well, Kentucky reached out. Like, yeah, at the midnight hour after he's already wrapped up visits and picked out his favorite restaurants in another SEC town. Like, you want to hold off. I want to be fair here. I want to hold off and see what this thing looks like when it is time to look at it. But at the same time, this has been an absolute train wreck for what is the most important offseason. And we've said this is the most important offseason every offseason since 2020. And it gets even more important, but the way it's managed and things, you can't help but wonder and maybe criticize a little bit that why is Kentucky in the position it's in? It's like they're being handcuffed by everybody. Their own players they're recruiting, everything is just I don't want to have two hands on the panic button, but if you're pushing the panic button right now and you listen to the show, I think you're perfectly entitled to do that and have that choice because what a disaster this has been for the last 6 or 7 weeks.
Well, even the biggest optimists for this recruiting class, and I'm not one of them. I've made my concerns very clear on this show about playing style, personality fit, culture. Like I have made it very clear that I have my concerns about this upcoming recruiting class, that they are the best of the group, but it's also a very poor group overall. So I've made that clear from day one. But I think even the biggest optimists about what this recruiting class is and its potential, we're also relying on a complementary group around them to, the veteran pieces. And that's why it's a massive hit. Will you be able to find a 14-point per game scorer in the portal, one that's going to, shoot 35% from three? Maybe the grad transfer route will still be available, whatever. But somebody that was in the system last year that knows what it takes to succeed at Kentucky, somebody who went on the road and dropped 37 points in a hostile road environment, playing for John Calipari, like that was the ideal matching mate alongside DJ Wagner and Rob Dillingham. And instead, he is now exploring not only just keeping his name in the draft, saying, you know what, I'm going to be 23 by the time the next basketball season starts. It is what it is, bro. I'm just ready to go pro. No, he's considering taking his talents elsewhere. And the transfer portal, that is a worst case scenario for Kentucky, just from a PR perspective. I think finding the player replacement would be tough but doable. But I think the PR hit that would come with that would be about as bad as it gets.
It would. And losing surefire guys that you had. I mean, look, we've talked about Antonio Reeves being part of this roster since the season ended. And then we had a period where we talked about Oscar Tshiebwe and the confidence there. And it's crazy how things change within this. And it makes us look like at times like we don't know what we're talking about. And because like one week we're here, the other week we're here, but that's the pulse of the fan base right now, though. Like I think this fan base is so confused and so stretched out and just kind of, you wake up every day and every day feels the same, but it's not the same because there's always some type of movement. It's going to be a crazy week. We know that. And at some point, this is going to have to be final, and we know what it's going to look like. But you had all these guys going into the transfer portal. I mean, all the thousands of names that went in the portal, and Kentucky is empty right now when it comes to that category. And that's a program that, I mean, and when you only have 7 guys on your roster, is there any excuse for not having a transfer added at this point?
And that's the argument. And there's a lot of people that go, well, it's 7 quality players and Cal only keeps a 7-man rotation. Anyway, it's like, Shawn, have these fans not seen how these seasons have unfolded year after year after year with injuries, foul trouble, guys going cold at the wrong time, Shaden Sharp situations where guys just don't effing play? Like, you can't just rely on 7 scholarship players and then say, well, worst case scenario, you got Grant Derbyshire there ready to man the point guard spot. Like, no, you need bigs. We had the number of scholarship guys that we had on last year's roster, and we're complaining about depth by year's end last season. Now you have 3 fewer players than that, but 4, maybe even 4. Did we have 11 scholarship players last year, I believe? I believe so. Whatever it was. 3 or 4 fewer than we had a season ago, and we were complaining about the depth then. You have to get depth. I'm right there with you. It doesn't matter. It does matter who it is. You got to find fits. And, I appreciate them reaching out to guys like David Jones at St. John's and, different pieces. I appreciate them kind of expanding their horizons a little bit and just saying, all right, we got to get bodies, man. Like, we already went into this offseason saying more rather than less. And now it's like you couldn't get any less than what we have right now. It's a worst case scenario time wise. You already have the underclass transfer portal closed. Yeah, there could, if Kobe Brown hits the portal as a grad transfer, then yeah, Cal can say, see, told you guys. And then we wouldn't have anything to complain about. Like, I would understand that. But that's also relying on things that very well could not come true. It's a really tough predicament to be in right now.
It is, and it's one of those things where I just keep coming back to there's no excuse to not have something from the portal, and I thought that this would actually be, we called it the most important offseason of the Calipari era, and until they climb that mountain back to the top of college basketball, we're going to continue to say that. But with what they had signed, and they signed those guys early in the fall, I thought it was going to be a relatively quiet off season, and it has been. It's just they've added nothing, and then they're losing guys that we didn't see them or even possibly losing, and that's not the definition of quiet. That's the definition of chaos with no answer to it, and that's what it's been for the better part of 6 to 7 weeks now. I mean, all the way back to the Hunter Dickinson situation and how that all played out. And now you move forward and you're thinking, okay, well, now you go all in on Oscar, and then that plays out the way it's playing out, and you're still in this whole Reeves situation. Kentucky has made up no ground in any scenario, and I don't know what conversations are going on right now behind closed doors, but I don't feel a sense of panic, but I'm panicking a little bit because why not? You got 7 dudes, and you keep going back to how this thing started. Maybe we should have known it was going to be chaos the way it started with Ugo and going to the portal, and then boom, a week later, right back to Kentucky. By the way, that's the only positive thing that I can give you is his highlight tape that he's been putting out. Like, his body looks good. He's changed that. He's doing some stuff that resembles playing some 5-out. He probably took more threes in that video the other day than what we're going to see him take at Kentucky this year,
or ever.
Yeah. So, but hey, he's working on it. But I'm frustrated. I guarantee you every single listener and viewer on this show right now is frustrated. I'm still optimistic that they got enough if they can add some role guys, but you're now into the part of the portal that it's grad transfer. That's how deep they are into this, that it's grad transfer.
Now you're relying on a Reed Travis to present it. You're relying on a, oh, thank God type guy. And, Kobe Brown could be that guy, but you don't want to wait for that thank God guy. You wait for that, okay, let's build the roster almost completely. It reminds me of that Andrew Wiggins year where the roster was done. You were confident in that roster with or without Andrew Wiggins, but if you got him, it was like, okay, now here we go. And obviously the season unfolded the way it did, but just the momentum and confidence about the roster going in. I do not feel good about a 7-man roster, and I don't care if they all are top 5 picks. All 4 the non-Reed Shepherd freshmen can be top 5 picks, and I would still feel like the rest of the rest of the team would have serious flaws, and the team would have its downfalls. Just because it's numbers, like it's math. You have to have depth. You have to have options. You have to, like, foul trouble happens, injuries happen. Like you just can't do that. And it's tough, man. It's really, really freaking tough. And
it is, and it's one of those things. Like, I mean, the graphic that we have up here on the side that Stevens put up, it's got a mark through Johnson, and we've talked about a ton of these topics for weeks, and you and I kind of keep stumbling over ourselves when it comes to Oscar and it comes to Reeves, and it's getting old because we're still talking about the same stuff, but yet it's an ever-changing situation. Like, every time that we get on here and record, there's always something that's changed, but we don't have the final outcome of it. And we're in late May now. It's May 24th. We're recording. Like, it's just, I don't understand. And I've said it multiple times too, that I'm a fan of bringing in the freshmen that they brought in. They did get the best of the best out of that class. And we've talked about, and you've talked about it, that it's not the most talented class when it comes to, in the John Calipari era, when it comes to overall numbers and where they stack up, but they did get the best of the best. But when you look at it, Jack, like, yeah, I'm for it. They've not won with the veteran route the last couple of years. They've not won going heavy on the transfer portal, but you still need those key pillar role pieces from the portal that are veterans or people coming back that have experience in your program before these freshmen can really help you and push you to a tournament run. You cannot go in with these 5 guys being your 5 and then just blending maybe average role guys around them. You need dudes who are seasoned in who they are at this point of college basketball that are older. And they need to find it at some point in the next week to 2 weeks. And I don't know if those guys are going to emerge and identify themselves or not. Do we get a surprise and maybe a Chris Livingston come back? I don't know at this point. Like, I've went through every possible scenario in my head of what this roster could look like, and I'm still kind of panicking a little bit just because where Kentucky's put themselves.
So I want to get your thoughts on the Antonio Reeves decision and how this unfolded, and if you agree with his mindset and the people around him, how they are approaching this. So as I kind of touched on at the beginning of the show with Keshad Johnson, it's kind of unfolding the way we talked about on this show as a worst case scenario with Antonio Reeves. When every time we talked about Antonio, we said, yes, they're very comfortable coming back to Kentucky. They really enjoyed their time at Kentucky, and they would be open to assuming that, assuming a draft opportunity doesn't present itself, he would be very open to a return. However, Kentucky needs to do its job to make him feel comfortable in his role and make him feel comfortable that they would brand him in a way that it would be worthwhile for him to come back. And unfortunately, I don't think Kentucky has done that. And unfortunately, that has led him to say, okay, well, I'm going to be 23 years old by the time the season starts. He turns 23, I believe, November 20th, I think. He is a 23-year-old with 1 season of eligibility remaining at the collegiate level. We saw a best case scenario for him in terms of role and usage at Arkansas. But the reason for that was because Cason Wallace was out. Xavier Wheeler was out. He had no choice but to have that role. And yes, he was absolutely outrageously good in that role. But there's almost a backfire that comes with putting all of your chips in the freshman basket. And these freshmen are superstars. They're going to be our saving grace. If you look at the comment section of theirs, there are so many people that go, our freshmen are superstars. They're fine, which I just disagree with. I have said that on the show. I disagree with them being superstars at this next level. I hope they prove me wrong, but I've seen them with my own 2 eyes a long, long list of times. The issue is with all of that talk about putting all the eggs in the freshman basket, Antonio Reeves is looking at that situation going, okay, well, am I just going to be put in my corner and jack up threes like Kellen Grady? Like Kellen Grady said out loud, all right, I'm just going to go back to my corner. Like that was Mr. Grad Transfer coming in for his one last role as at a blue blood, blah, blah, blah. That was Kellen Grady. Antonio Reeves is not coming back to be Kellen Grady. He wants to go somewhere where he is going to have an opportunity to make a lot of money with NIL, because I think they were okay with how NIL went this past year. He made okay money, but I think they were a little put out by Kentucky not going above and beyond to give him some branding opportunities. And that's why I kind of emphasize, if he were to come back, Kentucky would need to do a bang-up job of putting him at that next level and saying, all right, let's really brand the hell out of this kid, because he's going to be our veteran guard piece, guy capable of going and scoring 37 down in Fayetteville. I think when push came to shove, he is looking at this and going it's like Sean, to a lesser extent, what happened with CJ Frederick. CJ Frederick, yeah, it sounds great for him to be the vet guy and the glue piece and potential shooting specialist off the bench and all that. But when push comes to shove, dudes don't want to be limited to one little tiny finite role, especially with 1 year of eligibility remaining. This is his last shot. If he's going to come back, he wants Kentucky to make it worth his while. And if he doesn't feel that they're going to make it worth his while, and go all in with the freshman, and he's going to be Kellen Grady and just be put in his corner and jack up threes, he ain't coming back. And that's why I lean, as of May 24th, 5:52 p.m., I think Antonio Reeves is gone. I do.
And it's frustrating, right? And I get it. He had a terrible game against Kansas State in the biggest moment of Kentucky's season, and that's kind of where we're at here. Is you're putting all your eggs in a basket, of a guy that you're wondering if he's going to come back and use another year at Kentucky. But given where Kentucky's at with lack of scholarship players, lack of veteran pieces, it would be a significant loss to lose Antonio Reeves this late. Had you lost him in March, and then you could kind of identified another guy in the portal that can shoot it and be a three-way guy, you can find those guys in the portal. But it's harder to find them in late May. I think that's probably the thing that complicates it more. I mean, Antonio Reeves is a replaceable piece as long as you have options to look at to go replace him with. I just don't know if you can replace it this late. If he comes back, I think he's a guy that would want to play with the ball in his hands a lot. But I think the thing is, this freshman class coming in is going to require the ball in their hands more than the guys that were on the roster this past season. Like DJ, Rob, we know Justin's going to have the ball in his hands. Xavier struggled to shoot. We know that. There was more room for Antonio to play with the ball in his hands, to go middle ball screen, things like that. And then, like you saw it at the end of the year, like you mentioned at Arkansas, he had a big game when he was called upon to do that. For a guy that has one more year of eligibility, that has hopes of getting into that league, as you said, he doesn't want to be pigeonholed into a corner spot-up guy like Kellen Grady. He wants to play with the ball in his hands so he can showcase his game in all areas, off the ball, on the ball, to have a shot in that league a year from now. And I think that that's what it might end up coming down to. And it's frustrating. Like the whole – every offseason is frustrating, but it seems like it's more frustrating at Kentucky. And I'm like, this isn't a panic episode. I'm trying to stay within my line of panic and concerned. Like you can be concerned, but not be totally panicking. And I'm a little concerned because it's late, and I'm afraid Kentucky is going to be kind of left standing there with a really solid class coming in that maybe doesn't have the perfect pieces to blend around it. And I just don't think there's any excuse to have those guys. Like there's options here that, I mean, you had options in the portal. Like a lot of dudes went in the portal. How many names went in the portal this year?
1,700.
Yeah. And Kentucky's been linked to a few here and there. Maybe they were overconfident that Reeves was a for sure comeback. Maybe even a little overconfident that maybe Oscar was a for sure comeback. And that's the danger that you enter. If you don't make promises, and I know Cal doesn't do it, but sometimes if you let dudes kind of have their leash a little bit, then you're in a situation like you are right now where you waited and not recruited over people. And sometimes you have to take what you can get. And we know that they would have taken Hunter Dickinson at one point, which would have forced Oscar's decision to leave. And I guess the other thing I keep coming back to is there have been people that have left this program that I don't even know if it made sense to leave. Like Lance left, but there's a clear-cut role and options right now. Like if Oscar doesn't come back, Lance would have played a lot of minutes a year from now probably. And he goes to Villanova. And
it's the location that bothers me about Lance, not the fact that he's leaving. Yeah. Because again, and look, I'm Mr. Eternal Optimist trying to be excited and be a glass half full type guy. But why would a guy like Lance Ware leave the program right now with his buddies coming in, the Camden crew coming into Lexington, and guy that he played his senior year of high school with is finally 4 years later, finally, like there were so many things that, like, how much bigger is his role going to be at Villanova next season than at Kentucky? Like, I think he'll have a bigger role, but enough to leave the comfort that he had here. I don't know. I think there's a lot of writing on the wall that things aren't as good. My issue with it's not about Antonio Reeves leaving. It's the fact that the expectation was from the beginning that Antonio was going to come back, and there weren't any contingency plans, okay, well, if Antonio Reeves, well, this is going to be our guy. Like, I firmly believe that guy isn't there. Like, I don't think that Kentucky has an immediate replacement because they were so confident in Antonio coming back. it's about the staff's ability to read these tea leaves and to be proactive instead of reactive. And I think that is an ongoing theme here that we're missing, and that has led to the kind of not dysfunction, but lack of organization and some of those deeper rooted concerns that I personally have about the current state of affairs inside the Joe Kraft Center. Like, I think it's deeper than we're all leading on, and all these random departures on the staff, and like it's all deeper than I think we are giving it credit for, and that's my concern.
I had a conversation with somebody just a couple of days ago that, I mean, maybe I'm reaching here, but going back to Jay Lucas, when Jay Lucas left your program as a young up and coming name that is known in recruiting and brought future in the game, and he thought that Duke was a better fit for himself. The same idea that a lot of recruits feel like when it comes down to Kentucky and Duke in recent years. Maybe that should have been a little bit more eye-opening than what we looked at too, is that move as when it happened. And like you said, the random names that leave the staff, and then how long it kind of takes to fill roles on this staff, where at one point I think people were maybe busting down doors to try to get into this program. Now they're busting them down to get out of this program. And that's concerning. And my fear is that Cal is relaxed right now and comfortable thinking that he can run it back with freshmen and do what he did a decade ago. That's my fear, is that he just thinks, well, I didn't get the best of the best in recruiting the last few years. We went older. Now we're back to getting the best of the best, and that's going to be enough. We're going to be one and done. There's going to be 3 or 4 draft picks out of this group. Like, I'm afraid that might be his mindset. And if that's his mindset, I'm concerned, because the game is significantly older now than what it was 7 years ago. COVID changed that. There are old basketball players in college basketball. The 2 that Kentucky's waiting on right now are 2 of the oldest, in Oscar and Antonio. And that's college basketball now. And I think that's my concern, is is Cal relaxed right now, or is he kind of out here trying to, I don't know. I don't see him every day. But if he's relaxed, I'm not relaxed. Are you relaxed?
And it's hard. It really is hard, because, again, if you read these comments, and Curious Calculator has gone through the entire recruiting class saying why each player, DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards, Rob Dillingham, why they're all better than Antonio Reeves. And I understand the excitement, but understand where the excitement is coming from. Listen to the people that have actually watched these kids and know the personalities and the identities and what makes each of them tick. And I have had really in-depth conversations with people that know basketball infinitely more than me, and have seen these kids since they were in 7th grade. I've seen them for the last 3 years. I've seen guys that have known each of them since they were kids, and how they operate. And those guys have serious concerns about how they will all mesh together. That you can look at the numbers next to their name and all the T-shirts that are being made and the excitement about each and every one of them. That's great. It's awesome to look at highlights and think wow, Rob Dillingham dropped 40 points in an overtime elite highlight game that meant nothing to anybody in the competitive basketball world. That's going to be the reason why Kentucky is going to be back on top. You can be excited about that, but also understand that there are people that have been watching these kids for a really, really, really long time that are very, very skeptical and believe that this could go south in a hurry, especially considering how things are unfolding right now. They were kind of giving the program the benefit of the doubt if you got Oscar back, if you got Antonio Reeves back, or Chris Livingston, and you kind of made it an all-in effort with everybody combined, or hit a home run with Hunter Dickinson, or if Kobe Brown were to come. If there are still avenues to where you could maximize them, but if you are throwing them in with the Sharks from day one and relying on those 5 freshmen and Ugon Onyenso and Adu Theoro to carry to shoulder all of the pressure of this program, it will not work. And I don't care what you believe or what highlights you watch to indicate that elsewhere, but I'm here to tell you it will not work. And Kentucky has to hit home runs to close out this roster. You cannot go all in with just these 5 freshmen and expect a national championship, because that's just not reality.
And I know people in the comments think that we're being super negative today, but there's times where people probably think we're over positive. And I'm trying to stay within a line here, but can you confidently tell me that you are okay sitting here right now on May 24th that Kentucky has 7 players on its roster that have none of them have a role? None of them. Adu played limited role. Ugo played in November and didn't play much after that, early December. It's essentially 7 new faces in your program. And we're sitting here telling you right now that the other 2 that we thought would come back might not come back. So it could be a roster that returns no experience within the UK program. Like, it's not like that I'm sitting here trying to be negative. I'm just trying to say, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody that it's going to be okay, because I don't know it's going to be okay. I wish I did. And I hope that I'm sitting here in July and we're talking about how great this and fantastic this group looks against really talented teams. And I'm going to be open-minded to it. When I said when we started talking that I wanted to let the roster play out and then give a fair assessment of what it looks like. And John Calipari is still John Calipari. He's going to put something together, but is it going to be enough? That's the question. And then when you look at it, is Kentucky going to be able to run out there and on paper, like I know, and on paper doesn't matter, but what does Kentucky look like in December and January? I don't know. We don't know what the schedule is going to look like and things, but I don't want to sit here and tell you it's going to be great and sunshine and rainbows here, and me be sitting here in December with my hands on my head like I was last season going, I didn't see this coming. I'm a little concerned, and that's okay.
Would you rather us blindly say, yeah, DJ's the number 1 player in the class, or Aaron Bradshaw, a different recruiting service, has him at number 1? Oh, he's Kristaps Porzingis. He is the best shooting big man I've ever. He's a unicorn. He's an alien. He does, like, Rob Dillingham. Oh my God, the most electric player I've ever seen in my life, and he's gonna be a walk. Would you prefer the blind optimism and then make you guys pissed off when the games actually happen because we were lying to you? I mean, I'm in the gym watching these kids. Like, I'm there, ears and eyes on the ground with them from start to finish. Like, okay, like if you believe what you want, that's fine, but just don't say we didn't warn you. I'm tired of being negative.
Me too.
I do have maybe a little bit of positivity to share. Maybe just like a little bit. Cal is planning on flying to meet Oscar Tshiebwe this weekend. Oscar is currently in Pittsburgh. His brother's graduating, hanging out with his host family, just, doing his own family thing, kind of taking a step back, hitting briefly pause on the draft process. And then this weekend, I think, going to start ramping things up as we approach the withdrawal deadline next Wednesday. Cal's planning on flying to, I believe, Charlotte to meet him and Nate, his agent, and other guys involved in this process, and just kind of get to the bottom of this and say, all right, we need an answer from you. We need to figure out where you're leaning, how things are going. I was told from both an individual inside the program and also outside that kind of understands how this process is going and how conversations have gone with NBA teams with Oscar, that people close to Oscar are growing more open to the idea of returning to Kentucky for one final season. That would be incredible news. Kentucky has ever so slightly gained a little bit of optimism that that scenario could definitely unfold. I believe I went on this show and said from Kentucky's side that it was a 0.01% chance that Oscar was going to come back to start the offseason because those conversations did not go well between Oscar and his people in Kentucky. Things have improved quite a bit. And I think for the first time through this whole process, I think that there's an actual, I think it's more of a toss-up than it's all blind hope thinking that Oscar's going to come back. I think we're actually in toss-up zone. If he were to get a legitimate promise that these next couple of days with NBA teams, I think that there's a chance that he, more likely than not, he'd stay in. But I'm growing more positive about the possibility of Oscar coming back. And I think it's because Kentucky really wants him back and understands potentially just the magnitude of his decision. So
yeah, and it's a leadership role that's available on the roster. Like that's the one thing that is missing right now. Is it's not just a leadership role missing, it's someone who has played within this program. They can go get grad transfers, or they can go get people from the portal, and they can get talented pieces, and you need that, and they're going to have to do that. But there's a difference. If you have never played in this program, you don't understand it. So essentially, Kentucky would have a lot of guys, pretty much 90% of its roster coming in that has never played in this program. That's a scary thought. And I think that a guy like Oscar, and I know he has his where he's limited in certain areas. We know not the best athlete and things, not the best defender, but a guy that has laid it all on the line for 2.5 years in your program. I'm perfectly fine with that being the kind of veteran pillar piece that you build around. And then it gives you an anchor, a guy that's elite in the category of rebounding. But it also gives you someone that can lead the locker room, that has a voice that not only at Kentucky, but a voice in college basketball, one of the most popular players to play the game. And I think that would be a really good start. And then you try to piece another role player or two around him, veteran guys. And I think that then you start to kind of turn the table on the conversation we're having here. I just think Kentucky it's good Kentucky's going young again. I like that. I don't want to shy away from that. But you still need those 3 veteran guys on your roster that can kind of be the bridge from youth to experience and kind of bridge the gap. You got to have it. And I think that it would make life easier on these freshmen. We've talked about it, the status and the immediate temperature within the program. We knew that this was going to be a pressure-packed year, that this group coming in is going to have more pressure on them than any team that has walked on the floor at the University of Kentucky. Given where Kentucky's been in the Final Four drought, the deep tournament drought, where the mix in the fan base with Cal, it was going to be unfair expectations and pressure already placed upon them. If they don't have veteran dudes to play alongside them, you could see them crumble. That is my fear. That's where I think it's important that they hit something, and getting a guy like Oscar Tshiebwe back to can kind of shoulder some of that weight would be a significant step in the right direction.
I think that the thing that makes me most confident right now is, again, what happened when word leaked out about Aaron Bradshaw going to USC and Clutch trying to push him out. Cal said, I'm going to get this handled. They put on a persona that, they're making a mountain out of a molehill. This isn't that big of a deal, whatever. Why did Cal go out of his way to address it head on with the people that matter and say, we got to get this stuff taken care of? Cal seeing I don't think Kentucky was anticipating losing Antonio Reeves. I think they were not expecting it to get to this point. And I mean, I have talked to Antonio's people. They said, we would like to come back to Kentucky. We don't think that we're going to hear what we are wanting to hear in the draft process, and we're planning on coming back to Kentucky. So obviously Kentucky is going to, if they're telling me that, then obviously they're telling Kentucky, sharing similar optimism. But there was always with the caveat of assuming role and NIL makes sense for us. Like, that was always the caveat. And maybe this is all just they saw what happened with Aaron Bradshaw when Aaron Bradshaw had role concerns, like, is he going to be a stretch forward? Like, you better guarantee him that spot. And knowing that Cal went out of his way to massage that and make it happen, maybe they saw that writing and said, okay, well, if we make NIL demands or say, we're threatening to leave over NIL or role, maybe those conversations can get a little bit deeper and they can get what they're looking for. Like, maybe it's all leverage on Antonio's side. That's very possible. But every time Cal has been in a desperation situation this offseason, he has come up with an answer. So that's where my optimism is coming from. And I'm hoping that optimism results in the return of Oscar Tshiebwe for all the reasons that you said, from a talent perspective, from a leadership perspective, from this freshman group will not work if they do not have veteran pieces around them to let them know how the college game works and what's acceptable and what work ethic looks like at this level and structure and all of those things. They need those pieces. And Oscar Tshiebwe coming back would make me feel infinitely better about that. And if they can get Antonio back as well, massage that, get that fixed, then we're talking. Like that is when we can start going, all right, we're good. That's all we needed. We just need a little bit of pressure. That would be a best case scenario for this.
And in fairness to Cal, you know, obviously our job is to say positive things when it's time to say positive things, and to kind of criticize and question when it's time, but also to kind of stay in that line of the middle where we often stay most of the time. But he has dealt with a lot this offseason. Mm-hmm. And it started with the situation with Ugo. Like we know that one at one point was out of Kentucky's hands. And things when it comes to NIL and kind of, I guess, shopping value and things like that. But you had a kid that wanted to be at Kentucky from the beginning, and you survived that one, and then you deal with the clutch situation with Bradshaw. Like there's been things where he's had to fight to hold on for dear life for two people that should have been solidified on this roster when the season ended, that he'd already won the battle to get those guys. And then you go through the Hunter Dickinson situation and that recruitment, and then you're kind of – and then you got guys like Oscar and Reeves that you do want back, and you're not wanting to go after guys in the portal because you don't want to push people that you've already got in your program out the door. Not just your returning players, but your freshmen coming in. You don't want people asking out their letter of intent. Look what happened with Duke, which Duke has a really good roster. It'll be one of the better teams in college basketball, but that's the culture in college basketball now, is asking out a letter of intent. And I get it. There's a fine line there that Kentucky's walking, but I still think that the way that that we're so late and there's been no movement, I think that is where we're questioning what has Kentucky been doing for 8 to 10 weeks. Now, deadlines are approaching here pretty soon, and we should know something. I mean, Oscar, the decision has to be made relatively soon. Antonio Reeves.
A week from today.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of stuff play out over the course of the next week. There's probably going to be some transfer names pop up that we don't even know that we're going to see Kentucky linked to and reaching out to, and there's going to be a lot of movement. People are probably going to get confused at times, because I'm going to get confused with some of the connections and things Kentucky's doing, but you're going to see Kentucky going all in, I think, in the next 7 days to kind of get this thing shored up. And boy, I hope they definitely need to have their roster intact so everybody can get on campus at the same time here pretty soon, because that move-in day is quickly approaching.
Move-in day is literally in a week and a half. They will be next weekend. This freshman group will be on campus. Like, games are 6 weeks or 6 weeks from the deadline, 7 weeks from today.
It's not just the freshman group; it's the Kentucky basketball team at this moment. Like, the entire Kentucky basketball team will be on campus in about a week and a half, and it's all freshmen.
I like T.W. Johnson's question in here. Who is clutch? with a C. It's complicated. It's arguably the most powerful sports agency in the world right now, headlined by one LeBron James and his right-hand man, Rich Paul, who unfortunately have been calling a lot of shots as of late in the basketball realm. It has had a pretty terrible trickle-down effect with Kentucky, unfortunately, dealing with a lot of guys. It sucks because Kentucky has so many guys represented through clutch in the NBA that have had such great success stories under John Calipari. But it's just the most recent track record with how things have unfolded with Chris Livingston and then Aaron Bradshaw back to back. Like, I don't think you could get worse timing. And what's so fascinating to me is that Justin Edwards is the most low maintenance dude on the planet. Like, he just shows up and hoops everywhere he goes. And he's also represented by Clutch. Granted, his Clutch guy was also like his former AAU coach, who ended up becoming an agent. So it's like less high maintenance people involved with him. And it's still the same. It's still Clutch, but it's not the same level of Clutch. Like, it's not Rich Paul Clutch. And it's Rich Paul clutch for both Chris Livingston and Aaron Bradshaw. So it's unfortunately very powerful people that are like clutch right now. They're making Shawn an example of Chris Livingston, like talking to more people after the decision for him to not participate in 5-on-5. Like I was told that they're actively like going out of their way to prove just how powerful they are and what type of leverage they can create and what type of power, like in terms of draft status and getting a guarantee or whatever. Like they want to make an example of Chris Livingston and say, here is what we can do for you as a client. Like they want Chris Livingston to be the example, wasn't happy about how things unfolded at Kentucky, didn't think the role was right, blah, 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 blah. All of that stuff aside, we're still going to get you drafted. Like I think they're wanting to use Chris as an example, and I think it's going to work. It's crazy, but I think that dude's going to get drafted, and I don't know what. It's very complicated, but clutch is very powerful. Long story short, for whoever asked about clutch is very important. Unfortunately, I said clutch is about to give Maxey a $200 million contract. He's earned it, and there are a lot of Kentucky guys in the NBA associated with clutch. It's just they represent their client first and foremost, always. Sometimes it does not work for the program.
Yeah, the changes that have just occurred in college basketball in the last decade, just in John Calipari's time at Kentucky. I mean, it's not the same. It's not the same game as what it was in 2009. I mean, the NIL era, the transfer portal era, like there's so much that coaches have to do now that their job is already more difficult than what it ever was. But I feel like Kentucky's almost made theirs even more difficult by the way that they've kind of played this offseason. Like I thought that it should be easier to establish role players than what it has been. But money talks, and sometimes role players want greater roles. And we were talking about a week ago that, Johnson and stuff coming from San Diego State, like you have a role. I was talking, one of the key things about him, if you could add him, he would know what his role was, and he'd played a key role on a Final Four and a national championship run team. Sometimes those guys want more late in their career. Everybody has dreams of becoming a professional basketball player, and they want more opportunities and more minutes. And when you have a talented group of freshmen coming in that are going to be the bread and butter of this roster, we know that those dudes are going to play. That might be the biggest challenge to getting in the portal, is to getting guys to come play when you know that there's going to be guys younger that are already going to get the nod ahead of you, most likely, because we know Cal's going to play as freshman. And that might be a little bit of a crossroads that we're seeing here with Kentucky's inactivity in the portal and maybe not been able to build those relationships and recruiting those guys. Maybe that's the challenge right now. It might even be the challenge with some of your other dudes, trying to get them to come back. What is their role? Like, I don't know. Like, something's delayed it. Something has kind of put Kentucky in the position that they're in.
Oh, another positive note to slowly kind of trend downward on this show to wrap things up. Kentucky did announce the official hiring of John Welch, which that is a fantastic hire. And we've talked about him. We reported on this show that was going to happen, and talked the extent of it and just the importance of his role. But I did want to clarify, there are a lot of people that were saying that like he's KT Turner's replacement. That's not the case. He's being added on as one of the 5 on-court assistants that the NCAA is now allowing. So he is going to be the scouting, hands-on player relationship guy, but basically kind of a combination of what Kentucky was missing with John Robick out and what Kenny Payne, the void that Kenny Payne left when he left for the Knicks. So 2 unbelievably important roles on this staff that have not been replaced and not been filled. Cal, I wish, would get 2 of those guys to kind of not have to put, all of that pressure on John Welch to kind of save the program. But it's a really, really, really valuable piece that is coming in to this coaching staff that desperately needed it. And I am personally a huge fan of this hire, and he comes very, very highly regarded. So big old fat win on John Calipari's part.
Yeah, when you can read a press release that includes names like the development of Carmelo Anthony and Pau Gasol, DeMarcus Cousins, Blake Griffin, and then you get, working alongside coaches such as Doc Rivers, George Karl, Jason Kidd, Hubie Brown, Jerry Tarkanian, like that is a successful and winning pedigree in coaching and in player development. And I think that is the best news of the offseason to this point, is adding that guy to your staff, a guy that is familiar with your program from his son being here. Like that's another thing, a guy that's Cal's familiar with. And we kept talking that we didn't want Cal to go comfort with coaching staff hires, but this one made a ton of sense because this is a guy that has proven himself at multiple places with multiple people at different levels. And I think he brings a lot of value to what Kentucky is going to be doing moving forward in this era of this program. And I think it was a home run hire at that spot. I give it an A+.
And again, what we have said in the past about the importance of replacing KT Turner and not just saying, well, we're good. Sounds good. Like, again, I think the timing is now, like, you got to get the kids on campus. The players arrive next weekend. So obviously getting them acclimated and making them comfortable and quickly adapting, because again, they have games in 6 weeks after arriving. So first and foremost, that's the biggest priority. But once they get settled in, Shawn, I think Cal really has to grind out that decision and say, all right, we got to get to the bottom of this again. And I've heard, unfortunately, Cal hasn't fallen in love with any of these options. And it sucks because for all of the kind of negativity and pessimism we've had on this show, like, I don't think a lot of it is directed specifically at Cal. Like, I think a lot of it is Cal almost putting too much on his plate and not having the support staff to rely on to make all of these things happen and give him the guidance. I don't know. I feel like it needs to be a bigger all-in effort, but I think a part of that is adding this other name, this other piece that I think Cal just really has to get to the nitty-gritty of and say, all right, who is the right fit? You're getting the scouting guy, and maybe, I would like for John Welch to be all in on this scouting department and then go get a relationship guy. Welch is good at it, but I also think that you need a go-to designated player relationship guy. That would be my next step. I think you got recruiters. I think recruiting is going to be fine. I think it's going to be about getting that player relationship guy to wrap up this up. And Shawn, where would you look for that? If you're looking for a guy that is just known for being I mean, it's not going to be Kenny Payne, but who would be the Kenny Payne equivalent? Where would you look for the NBA? Would you look for where would you look for somebody like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I mean, you could look around college basketball and things, but I think I would probably go NBA, where I think dealing and building relationships with players is very important at that level. And we know that, I mean, head coaches are head coaches in the league, but there's always a guy within an organization that is really important to player development, and the bridge from player to organization to coach to president to whatever. Maybe you go look at one of these successful NBA franchises and you go get a guy that's proven himself there and maybe has a good reputation and good connections and is high praised. I don't know where you go get it, but maybe do you look at, is there anyone that's a former player that has had some success in the league?
Who knows what they needed during their time at Kentucky? I think that'd be massive.
I mean, you got a ton of names that have been successful in this program that have gone on to wear different hats and been successful players. I mean, from Tayshaun Prince to other guys that I've always thought would look really good doing something in this program. And I don't know where Kentucky goes with it, but
there have been like 4 different people that have brought up Pat Riley's name.
Oh, that would be great.
Go get the ghost of Red Auerbach. Go get Brad Stevens. Go get, I heard, just go down the list. Phil Jackson's and looking for a job. I've heard we can just fill this roster out with whoever we want, Shawn. That's where we need to start looking. Just go to the best coaching names in history and form the Monstars of college coaches.
Anthony Davis still has 3 years of eligibility left if we can go
He
figure
does.
out a way to get it. I mean, no, it would be Pat Riley would definitely be the. Can we get Pat Riley to be the head coach by any chance? Like, I mean,
That's
you
what
know
one.
what I mean?
That's what somebody said. They said
Yeah, like,
Ben from Kentucky said if we hired Pat Riley as a coach, that would be unreal.
yeah, like I mean, yeah, pull him from the Miami Heat, but just go get Eric Spoelstra while we're at it too. Like anybody,
Why not?
yeah, like just have at it. No,
It's going to be really embarrassing when the Celtics come back and win in Game 7, and Eric Spoelstra is going to have no choice but to come back. And Mitch, make that call, buddy. Make it happen.
Oh my goodness. You think they're coming back, don't you?
No, not at all. I'm friends with a lot of Lakers fans, so I just needed the comfort of us not getting swept and the Lakers getting swept. Like that's all I needed. I just had to get that. Oh, I know. Like part of it is being able to say, "Wow, you have arguably the greatest player to ever touch a basketball, and you get swept in the conference finals." But Celtics sure didn't. That I don't know what to tell you, buddy. Like, Legoat is Lagon. Anyway, it has been quite a day, and I don't know. I hate being negative. I do not like when these shows turn into being negative, but I don't know. Sometimes it's just like when you hear so much behind the scenes and you keep it festering. You're trying to be Mr. Rah Rah. It's like sometimes I need to get just some stuff off my chest, and I think this was a good one. And people are all making fun of me in the chat. BBN podcast. Jason Tatum is not that guy. By the way, Marcus Smart isn't him either. Sorry, Jack. MC Jack, how are you going to be a Boston fan when they're led by a Duke and have a ball flopper? Yeah, I know. It is what it is. I can't help myself. Anyway, Shawn, anything else that we want to touch on before we wrap this thing up?
I'm just thinking to see if there's anything we need to maybe hit on. I don't think so. Just that, I mean, the deadline's coming here a week from now, like the next time we record. Who knows? We were planning an episode to talk about, Johnson's recruitment and things, and that wasn't what we wanted to talk about over the weekend. So hopefully the next one brings more positivity than this one, because this one didn't have a ton of it, and it's tough. It's tough to talk about things when there's still a lot of movement happening with Kentucky, and there's a lot of things going on that should be set. Like mid-May is out the door. Like we're beyond mid-May now. I just want to hope when I'm trying to get into Canada here in about 7 weeks that Kentucky has a complete roster together, because if not, then maybe we should be concerned.
Cal is at his best when he has his back against the wall and people doubt him. I think we will see that version of Cal in the next week plus leading up to this deadline. And if things don't unfold in the way Kentucky desperately needs approaching that Wednesday deadline, the grad transfer route, I think all hell will come loose with Coach Cal. And that's what I'm like, fingers crossed. This is when we see the best version of Cal in the recruiting trail. So I'm hoping that this pressure is good. But I'm just saying that there is pressure right now, and things are not good. But there's still time, and we're going to flip the script and be optimistic to close this thing out. And we're going to believe. We're going to make it happen. Anyway, let's get out of here. One final note from our friends Andy Ludicky and MyPerfectFranchise.net. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as franchise owner, and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help. If you have any questions about business ownership, you can learn more and contact Andy anytime at www.myperfectfranchise.net. Appreciate all of our listeners. As always, feedback was great on this. A little bit negative for my liking, and a lot of some animosity in our chat today. But you know what? It can't always be sunshine and rainbow. Sometimes we gotta be real with it. So appreciate everybody hanging on and talking with us. It was a good little afternoon. I like the way BBN podcast is going to end it. Hopefully the next pod is super positive one because Cats came back. I love to hear that, Shawn. Let's get out of here. Where can fans find your work?
You can find my work at gobigbluecountry.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at GBBCountry.
Find me on Twitter as well at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Reach out to me via email, jpilgrim at KentuckySportsRadio.com. That will be back next time, hopefully for a very positive version of the Source Slate podcast. We will see you then.